Alright, so what we're going to do is just a quick tutorial on how we could create our own little bumper logo. So first thing we're going to do, I am going to do create, and under our settings I'm going to go to film and video, and remember we've been working under the 720p, that's fine. Remember, if you wanted to go higher, just realize that you're going to need higher quality imagery for that. So 720 is fine for what we're going to do here. So I'm going to hit OK and create. And here is our framing that we're going to use to create our logo. Let me just close that so we don't need that. So the first thing I'm going to do is go over here and drag out a square. So I'm just going to drag that out. It's actually a rectangle, but alright. So that's going to be my background. You'll notice that it goes over in my layers. I'll just call that background. So just double click and add that on there. And now I'm going to go over into this tool right here, which is our text tool, and I'm going to click on that, and let's see, let's just add text. Now right now it's locking it on my square, so I'm actually going to delete that. Let's see if I can get that over here. So I'm just going to type in Pieco Studios. Now you can't see it because it's matching the same area over there. That's fine. I'm actually going to grab that, bring it up, and I have Pieco Studios. So that's what we're going to use for my text. However, I do not like the way that this font looks. So what we can easily do is just double click in the T over here in the layers, and I'm going to go into the drop down over here, and it gives me basically different fonts that I can choose from. And we just need to find something that we think works for us. And remember, we can install new fonts and mess with those, but for the sake of this tutorial, we're just keeping it simple. Hopefully you'll make something better looking than this quick sample here. So I'm just looking for something that's interesting. So I'll go with that. Okay, so I have a bit of text, but it's actually blending in with the background, so not a fan of how that's doing it. So I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to change my colors. So maybe I'm going to have like a purple. If you click off of that, so I usually just click usually this one right here, which is marquee select. It'll deselect what you just had. And so now if I hit the V key, I can make sure it's centered, because you'll notice these lines that are occurring. So as you drag it around, and if you don't want to press the V key, you can just go over here and click on these arrows, and that's going to move around the object that you have highlighted. And I like that right here, so I think that's fine. I'm going to double click on that again though, and I'm going to drop down. That's already the size that is the largest by default that we can do, but what you can do here is just add, let's say 120. It's looking pretty good, but what happened? Well, it's no longer centered. So we can actually hit the center alignment, and I'm actually going to once again use my arrow, drag it until I find that line. There we go. And I like that, but I'm actually going to make this a little more fancy than it currently is. So what I'm going to do is right click on my text layer over here. I'm going to hit duplicate layer, and using my arrow keys, since I have the move tool selected, I can use the arrow keys, and I'm going to move this up and maybe over to the left a little bit. Now that I'm just messing around with this, please don't make the same design for your own logos. That's the whole, it's like missing the entire point for this. So now that I have another one on top of this, I can go into my effects and start to play with that. So the first thing I'm going to do is bevel and emboss. So bevel and emboss gives some interesting highlights and shadows, and it actually can shape our text. Right now it's up pretty high, so maybe going around here. Now I can also do some interesting things, such as adding a gradient. Now right now that blew out all my color, and it's set from white to black. I'm actually going to leave that alone for now, but I'm going to show you that we can modify that. It's set to radial. I'm going to go back to linear. It's also set to overlay. So let's see, if we move around this circle, we'll change the direction it's going in. So if I keep it so it's up to down, you'll see that it starts from light to dark, and we can also increase or decrease the scale of that. So now that I see what that's doing, I'm going to drop my opacity of that. Now, one of the major things that happens when students work on art digitally, they add black, and black on color when we're doing like an overlay or something like that, it ends up looking really, really dingy. It just doesn't really have the effect that I think students are trying to go for. So think about a color more like a dark brown or a dark red when doing that, because it will prevent that from looking super grayed out. So that's okay. Next I'm going to go into my stroke, and let's say that we have it so it's like a dark purple as well. And I'm just flying off doing this randomly. I'm not really I don't have any thumbnails right here, so that's why it's not exactly the greatest looking logo here. I'm just trying to throw something together for this tutorial, but please try to look at art for inspiration here. So look at other logos, look at color choices, all that fun stuff. You don't want to just kind of knock something out that you're not proud of. So we got this thing right here. I actually just like this original one, so I'm going to close that one and leave that alone. Maybe I will add, though, that stroke to it. Or, let's see, let's try a drop shadow. So I'm going to go and increase the opacity and the distance. Change the angle so it looks like it's a little bit behind it. And let's see, if I increase the spread, let's increase the size so it blurs out. That's a little bit better. And I'm going to make that a little bit more purpley. Okay. That's not bad. I'm going to do one more thing. Turn on bevel and emboss. Reduce the size of that this time. I'm going to turn that to chisel hard. So you have a lot of different options in here. Chisel hard seems to make a little bit more sense here. And again, the white isn't exactly the greatest thing to use, so maybe making that an off-white, so like a pink there, and then purple prevents it from looking super amateur, although this isn't the greatest looking logo yet. So I have this. Now there's a lot of other things we can do to our text. We can double click on the text. You'll notice that there is this tool up here. If we click on that, that will apply a warp to it. So if you want to make it arc, obviously that's a lot, but we can make it so maybe it arcs around an image that shows up here. We can have it bulge for whatever reason. Have that set as a flag. So I'm going to leave it at none. I'm going to hit OK. And I'm actually going to save this. Remember, I want more stuff added in here, like images and things like that. But let's say that this is sort of what we wanted to work with for our piece. So if I were to go into Premiere with this, I would first go to File, Save As, and for the sake of this, I'm just going to put this into a new folder. I'll put it in After Effects Demos, although it's not After Effects. We're going to call this Logo, and just name this Logo. And by default, it's set as Photoshop. That's good. We want to make sure Layers is checked, so that way we can bring out that background and the foreground. We'll hit Save, hit OK. And now in Premiere, we can start a new project. Make sure you're sending it to where you can find it, and you're also establishing this so the next time you do this, it's going to go in the same spot. So if this is on your thumb drive, then that's where it should go. If it's on your desktop, make sure your desktop, you drag it to your thumb drive at the end of the day, or if it's on your H drive, just make sure you can get to it again. So I have mine under Logo. I'm going to leave that there and select the folder for it. And now every time that my computer looks for it, it's going to look for it there. That's why a lot of you had those title bars popping up, or those color bars. So if you're wondering why that's happening, it's because you're not setting this up correctly, or the stuff was moved. So now that that's going on, I'm going to go into my import media just by right clicking, going to import, and under projects I have it under my logo, and that is my Photoshop file. So I'm going to hit open. And you can either merge the layers or bring them in as individual layers, and that's what we want to do, is bring them as individual layers. You'll notice there was that copy that I turned off because I didn't like it, so I poked the eye in Photoshop. Remember, that's how you turn those on or off. And then I have that background and the background behind it, so that's actually pretty good. Now you'll notice when I have that in here, all those came in the same way, and that's helpful because we can actually tweak things in Photoshop and then they'll show up in Premiere. So I'll hit OK, and for my logo I'll just click and drag these into my timeline. So I open that up and I'm holding down Shift to select both and just drag it in my timeline. You'll notice that goes 10 seconds. And what's happening? Well, I have the gray background and then Pieco Studios on top of that. So what I'm actually going to do is grab this one, put it on top, and look at that. It's just there. So in the program view, we can see there's my logo. And man, that looks super dynamic, right? No, it's not moving. So what we can do is start to mess with this underneath our effect controls. So that's over on the left side here, and if you click on effect controls, make sure that the piece that you're working on is selected, and you'll notice that it's saying 640 by 360 is my position. Well, I'm going to make sure that I'm at the very, very beginning, and watch what happens if I were to drag this. Notice it just disappeared. That's because I changed the position. So this is actually an easy way to animate our logo. Now, to be able to get that to set a keyframe, and that's what we use when we animate things, is our keyframes, you'll notice this little stopwatch right here. And that's going to set a keyframe for us. So the first thing I'm going to do is go, let's say, to about here. I'm just eyeballing this. I'm going to hit this keyframe. You'll notice it drops it right here. So basically it's telling the computer this is where I want the position of my object to be. Now I'm going to go back in time. I'm going to drag this up and out of view, and notice it already put a keyframe in there for me. So if I hit spacebar, that's super slow and super boring. So to be able to make this look like it is moving a little bit more with energy, let's change where that keyframe position is on our slider here, or on in our time frame right here. So I'm going to click on this one, drag it closer, and hit play. It's getting faster. Just make it right there. Okay, so it's sliding in. Now you can do a bunch of other things. You can have the object rotate while it's coming in. So I'm going to actually set a rotation keyframe, because that's where I want it to be at the end first, and then I'm going to go up and I'm going to rotate this thing around and around and around and around, and make sure at the very first keyframe you can't see it. Okay, so there we go. So now if I hit play, that's super corny, but as you can see, we can start to come up with some cool stuff though. So spinning, stops. Now let's do something else. I'm actually going to add something to my opacity. Opacity is the level of visibility that we'll be able to have on this. So right now it's 100% opaque. So again, I'm going to key that. So we got a keyframe there. And I'm going to bring it back in time, and I'm going to drop that down to 0. So now it's fading from 0 to 100%. Now, maybe I want this to feel like it was hitting its mark, and it like sunk in to this spot. So I want to show some bounce to the very end. That's actually pretty easy to do. So we have it on our position right here, 640 by 360. But if I go forward a little bit, and I can actually make this go down just a tad, and then I'm going to take this keyframe, I'm going to copy it. So just right click and hit copy, move it forward a little bit, hit paste, and then there we go. So now I have this thing going down for like a frame, and then up one frame. So what that's doing is giving me just a little bounce to that when it hits. Now I would continue to tweak this, but this is looking pretty good for the start of this. So we talked about the different motions and animations and opacity in here, and we also talked about how we added that in Photoshop. Remember, to be able to export this thing, we'll have to go through and export the media, and we need to make sure that we export it as a QuickTime movie. So that would be QuickTime, and then we can go into our settings. So same stuff that we've gone through with our previous stuff, so H.264. Right now it looks like I'm going to have to adjust my sides because they're not wide enough for this, but that's an easy thing to do. But we can export that, and it looks like it's going to be at 5 seconds, which is good. But remember, I want some images in here as well, and this is what we'll be doing.